And he pulled my skirt down. The Florida sun had dipped below the horizon, leaving behind a warm, golden glow that clung to the evening sky. Leah adjusted the strap of her emerald green dress, the one her mother had insisted she wear to the party. It hugged her curves perfectly, and she felt confident as she stepped out of the car, her parents trailing behind her. The party was at a sprawling estate, one of those upscale gatherings where the champagne flowed freely, and the air buzzed with laughter and conversation. Leah wasn't particularly in the mood for socializing, but her parents had insisted. "You're 24, Leah," her mother had said. "You need to get out more." The moment she walked into the party, she felt eyes on her. She was used to it. Owning an advertising company at her age had taught her how to command attention. But there was one pair of eyes that lingered longer than the others. She spotted him across the room, leaning casually against the bar, a glass of whiskey in hand. He was tall, with tousled dark hair and a smirk that seemed to say he knew something she didn't. His name, she would soon learn, was Carl. Carl was 23, a student worker with a charm that was almost too effortless. He had a way of making people feel like they were the only ones in the room, and when he approached Leah, she felt that magnetic pull immediately. "You look like you've been waiting for me," he said, his voice low and smooth. It was a line so bold it should have been ridiculous, but the way he said it made her heart skip a beat. Leah raised an eyebrow, trying to play it cool. "And what makes you think that?" Carl leaned in closer, his breath warm against her ear. "Because I've been waiting for you." The night unfolded like a dream. They talked, they laughed, and when Carl suggested they slip away from the party, Leah didn't hesitate. They found themselves in the garden, the moonlight casting a silvery glow over everything. Carl's hands were gentle but insistent as he pulled her close, his lips finding hers in a kiss that left her breathless. It was an experience Leah had never had before. A connection so intense it felt like the world had narrowed down to just the two of them. As the kiss deepened, Carl's hands wandered, exploring the curves of her body with a confidence that made Leah's knees weak. She felt a shiver run down her spine as his fingers brushed against the hem of her skirt. "Carl," she whispered, her voice trembling with anticipation. He pulled back slightly, his eyes locking onto hers. "Trust me," he murmured, his voice a low, seductive promise. And then with a slow, deliberate motion, he pulled her skirt down, letting it pool at her feet. Leah gasped, her heart pounding in her chest as she stood there, exposed and vulnerable, yet completely captivated by the man in front of her. The intimacy that followed was unlike anything Leah had ever experienced. Carl's touch was electric, sending waves of pleasure through her body as they explored each other in the moonlit garden. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated passion, one that Leah would never forget. In the weeks that followed, Leah was swept off her feet. Carl was everything she thought she wanted. Charming, attentive, and just a little mysterious. She introduced him to her friends, brought him to company events, and even started imagining a future together. But Carl was harder to pin down. He was sweet when they were together, but there were moments when he seemed distant, like his mind was somewhere else entirely. One afternoon, as Leah was driving through town, she saw something that made her stomach drop. Carl was walking down the street, holding hands with another woman. They were laughing, their heads close together, and the sight of it made Leah's blood boil. She pulled over, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. How could he do this to her? After everything they'd shared? She confronted him that night, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. Carl tried to explain, but his words felt hollow. "It's not what you think," he said, but Leah wasn't sure she believed him. The trust she had placed in him was shattered, and she wasn't sure if it could ever be repaired. But Leah wasn't one to back down easily. She had built her company from the ground up, fought for every success she had, and she wasn't about to let Carl walk away without a fight. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she made a decision. She would find out the truth about Carl, no matter what it took. And if he had betrayed her, she would make sure he regretted it. Lee's heart was a storm of emotions as she watched Carl walk away after their confrontation. His excuses rang hollow in her ears, and the image of him holding hands with that woman, Marie, burned in her mind. She couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, but she also couldn't ignore the nagging curiosity about who Marie really was. Determined to uncover the truth, Leah decided to do some digging. A few days later, Leah found herself face to face with Marie. The encounter was tense, with both women sizing each other up. Marie, a striking woman with sharp features and an air of quiet confidence, was just as defensive as Leah. "Who are you to Carl?" Leah demanded, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. Marie crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "Who am I? Who are you? Carl and I grew up together. Our grandmothers raised us in the same house. He's like family to me." Leah was taken aback. She hadn't expected that. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but her pride still stung. "Then why didn't he tell me about you?" she shot back. Marie sighed, her defensive stance softening slightly. "Because Carl doesn't take anything seriously. He's always been like that. Charming, but never fully committed. I've known him my whole life, and I've seen him do this to other women. I didn't mean to cause trouble between you two, but I'm not going to apologize for being in his life." Leah felt a mix of relief and frustration. Relief because Carl hadn't been cheating on her, but frustration because his lack of seriousness had caused so much unnecessary pain. She realized that Marie wasn't the enemy. Carl's inability to be honest and committed was the real issue. Weeks passed, and Leah tried to move on, throwing herself into her work. But fate had other plans. One evening, as she was leaving her office, she spotted Marie sitting on a bench outside, her face pale and her hands trembling. Leah hesitated for a moment before approaching her. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice softer than she had intended. Marie looked up, surprised to see Leah. "I don't know. I just got some bad news. My grandmother, the woman who raised me, is in the hospital. I don't know what to do." Lee's heart softened. Despite their rocky start, she couldn't ignore someone in need. "Let me help you," she said firmly. "I'll drive you to the hospital." Marie looked at her, tears welling in her eyes. "Why would you help me?" "After everything," Leah shrugged. "Because it's the right thing to do. And maybe we got off on the wrong foot." That night marked the beginning of an unexpected friendship. Leah stayed with Marie at the hospital, offering support and comfort. They talked for hours, sharing stories about their lives and realizing they had more in common than they thought. Marie opened up about her complicated relationship with Carl, and Leah shared her frustrations with his lack of commitment. As the days turned into weeks, Leah and Marie grew closer. They began spending time together outside of the hospital, bonding over shared interests and mutual respect. Leah realized that Marie was a kind, loyal person who had been caught in the middle of Carl's indecisiveness just as much as she had. Meanwhile, Carl remained in the background, still charming but still distant. Leah finally confronted him one last time. "I can't do this anymore, Carl," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You're not serious about me, and I deserve someone who is. I'm letting you go." Carl looked at her, his usual smirk absent. "Leah, She held up a hand to stop him. "Don't. Just don't. I've moved on and I think you should too." Leah walked away, feeling a sense of closure she hadn't realized she needed. She had let go of Carl, but in the process, she had gained something far more valuable. A true friend in Marie. One quiet evening, Carl found himself alone in his apartment, scrolling through his phone to distract himself from the weight of his thoughts. He absent-mindedly opened a game, but his fingers fumbled, and instead of launching the app, he accidentally dialed Lee's number. When her voice came through the speaker, soft and familiar, he froze for a moment. "Carl," she said, her tone a mix of surprise and curiosity. He hesitated, then blurted out, "Can I come over?" There was a pause on the other end, and then Leah replied, "Sure." Carl's heart raced as he grabbed his keys and headed to her place. Meanwhile, Leah quickly changed out of her nightgown, slipping into a sleek, daring dress that hugged her curves perfectly. She dimmed the lights, spritzed her favorite perfume, and waited. When Carl arrived, the tension between them was palpable. Without a word, he stepped behind her, his hands sliding around her waist. He pulled her close, his breath warm against her neck as he kissed her skin, his hands exploring her body with a hunger that left her breathless. This time, he pushed her underwear to the side, his touch electric, his kisses trailing down her back as they lost themselves in the heat of the moment. But the passion of the night couldn't erase the growing complexities of their relationship. Carl's internal struggles were mounting. He was deeply in love with Leah, but he felt inadequate. His job as a student worker was underpaying him, and he hated that Leah always footed the bill whenever they went out. He wanted to be the man she deserved, someone responsible, someone who could provide, but his financial situation made him feel like a failure. He kept these feelings bottled up, too proud to admit his struggles. Marie, who had become a close friend to both Leah and Carl, noticed the tension. One day, she pulled Carl aside. "You need to tell her," Marie said firmly. "Leah cares about you, but she can't help if she doesn't know what's going on. You're pushing her away by hiding this." Carl sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I don't want her to think I'm weak or that I'm using her." Marie shook her head. "That's your pride talking. Leah isn't like that. She'll understand. But you have to be honest with her." Taking Marie's advice to heart, Carl finally opened up to Leah one evening as they sat on her couch. "Leah, there's something I need to tell you," he began, his voice hesitant. "I've been struggling with my job. I'm underpaid, and it's been hard for me to keep up. I hate that you always pay for everything. I want to be the man you deserve, but I feel like I'm falling short." Leah listened quietly, her expression softening. When he finished, she reached out and took his hand. "Carl, why didn't you tell me sooner? I care about you, not your bank account. We're a team, and teams support each other." Carl looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of relief and vulnerability. "I didn't want to disappoint you." Leah smiled gently. "You could never disappoint me by being honest. Let's figure this out together." A few days later, Leah surprised Carl with an opportunity she had been working on behind the scenes. She had used her connections in the advertising world to secure him a position at a prestigious marketing firm, one that not only paid well but also aligned with his career aspirations. When she told him, Carl was speechless. "Leah, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll take it," she said with a grin. "This is your chance to shine, Carl. And I'll be right here, cheering you on." Carl pulled her into a tight embrace, his heart swelling with gratitude and love. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything." The new job was a turning point for Carl. He thrived in his role, gaining confidence and financial stability. More importantly, it brought him and Leah closer than ever. They were no longer just lovers, they were partners, supporting each other through life's challenges and celebrating each other's successes. One evening, as they sat on the balcony of Lee's apartment, watching the sunset over the Florida skyline, Carl turned to her. "Leah, I love you," he said, his voice steady and sincere. "I've always loved you, but I was too scared to fully show it. You've changed my life in ways I can't even explain." Leah smiled, her eyes glistening with emotion. "I love you too, Carl. And I'm proud of the man you've become." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Carl and Leah leaned into each other, their hearts full. They had weathered storms, faced insecurities, and emerged stronger together. And in that moment, they knew their story was just beginning. A story of love, growth, and unwavering support. Subscribe and share.